Good morning. Today's build is a little bit of a weird one, but mechanically it really stimulates my brain, so I'm excited to do it. It is a clay extruder. It's for pottery stuff. We'll get into it and you'll see what I'm talking about. The challenge before us is to build a device that will squeeze out a consistent handle material that can then be shaped and molded onto a mug. This is basically a Play-Doh extruder, but on steroids. We're going to need a lot of leverage to be able to squeeze clay out through a die. Now, this isn't the finished product. This just gives the potter a consistent piece of clay to then mold to each cup. My design for the frame is going to be as rugged as possible. I'm going to use scrap deep strut and scrap regular strut, basically tube steel is what we're going to build this out of. And I'm going to make it as robust as possible. Everything that's going to touch the clay is going to need to be washed, so I'm planning on using an aluminum tube and aluminum plates. First step is prep all the aluminum, and then I'll show you what's going on in my crazy head. Here's a tip for you when hole sawing by hand. You don't want to engage all the teeth all at once. You're not going to be able to handle it on larger hole saws. Try to stick with just one side. Just give a slight cant. It's not going to ruin the end product, I promise you. And you'll be able to drill that hole, and you won't burn your drill out. Alright, so I've cleaned up the parts. I'm gonna kind of talk through what I'm thinking here on how to accomplish this. The idea is there's gonna be a tube. This tube is gonna house all the clay. The clay will go in the tube. Then there'll be a leverage and compression that will squeeze the clay down through a die. Now, a piece of aluminum or stainless steel would probably be the best die, but I don't have a CNC to kind of carve very specific shapes. So instead, what Chris made me was these. These are cut out of a laser cutter. And so he has different sizes for each different handle. Now what will happen is, obviously we don't necessarily want to squeeze 4 different sizes out at one time. So instead, it'll be 2 layers, okay? And then there'll be a selector. And so that will isolate each piece. And then you can move that over depending on which one you want for the given day. Now, these, let's just forget all the weirdness. Let's just stick to a die, okay? Okay, so this die is gonna end up going in a slot. I'm gonna make a slot, and I'll have to shim a couple of pieces of aluminum, basically to make a spot for the dies to fit through. Then this pipe will be up here, housing the stuff. We'll squeeze it out, and you'll get your handle material that way. All right, let's just build it. All right, I need a few more things, so it's off to the scrap heap. see what we can find. Let's see what we have. Ooh, well, that's plenty rugged. So I think I've got it pretty well sorted out. All right, here's our bottom pieces. It's with some scrap double strut, so it's pretty rigid, pretty strong. Then we have our smaller cutouts. Then we have our die inserts. These will basically slide in, and then we'll have our one punch out. Then we have our next small cutout. Then we have our large cutout, and that's just to keep this to retain the tube in place. Then the tube, I'm gonna weld these on a 90, like this. The only thing left to cut is I need to weld a couple of horizontal pieces. Actually, these almost work. Right here and at the bottom. And then I'm gonna weld this piece of scrap pipe here to those pieces, like that. And then the idea is, move this piece. This is gonna sit here like this. This ring I'll put in before I weld, hopefully I remember. All right, and then I'm gonna have a piece of bar attached to this for the lever arm. And then that way you can almost adjust, depending on how much clay you have, you can bring this up and down to get your right leverage. I got a few more pieces to cut, then we can start tacking it in place, make sure it'll work, and then commit. All right, I think I'm happy with this where it is. I think everything as far as design is gonna work out as of right now. So I'm gonna commit and start welding everything 100%, running all the beads and the base is done. You're gonna see it's got a really weird looking paint job. I sprayed it this obnoxious gold at first, just to be funny. And I didn't let it completely dry, I think, when I went to spray over with the black that I originally intended on doing. And then it sort of mixed. The black spray paint kind of intermingled, almost like something you would do if you did an epoxy thing. And it kind of looks cool. So I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna leave it like that. If they hate it later, they could just spray paint it black themselves. The next step in the process is I'm gonna drill out all of my aluminum plate. My plan is I'm gonna take the top one, figure out where I want my bolt holes. I'll get this one drilled, and then I'll use this as a template to make sure all the other ones line up. Then we'll bolt this thing down with the spacers and we'll start working on the handle. All right, so all my pieces are all cut out now. There's one last thing that I have to deal with, and I haven't touched any of it yet, and that's I have to cut some of this plastic for the spacer. Instead of using these like individual shims, I'm gonna throw these out. I'm gonna take the other size plastic that is the size we want, and I'm going to make a squared out sort of horseshoe to fit around this die insert. And that'll be the last piece we need, and then we can assemble it. Okay, it's time to assemble this. What I'm gonna use is 1/2 inch stock because I used to demo substations a lot, and we got 1,000,000 pounds worth of these that we just throw out. You don't need 1/2 inch to support this, okay? Like 1/4 inch will be fine. I just have a lot of 1/2 inch, so you'll see me use it all the time. What I'm gonna use to lock it down to the strut is what's called a strut nut, or a unistrut nut, or another term would be a spring nut, okay? A lot of times they'll have a little spring that'll go on there, and they'll hold this nut up inside the channel. I always rip the spring out because they drive me crazy. You sort of preload the nut onto the bolt, and then you slide it in place and tighten it down, all right? And what will happen is, if my fingers are the strut, as you tighten, it turns and then locks in place. That's it. I'm watching the UPS guy try to back up and he can't figure it out. Gotta cut him some slack, he's new. Okay, the last piece of this, potentially, is the plunger itself. So I have to fabricate something that's the exact dimension of the inside of this pipe. And then I need it to be able to swivel on this, and then this will be my leverage. So I've got all this leverage against this pivot point to put down pressure to do the squeezage. All right, I sent that beauty home with Chris to try it out, and there's a few things we need to change about it. A few things that aren't great that we need to change. So he's coming over today, we're gonna fix it. I had some major surgery, so I'm kind of hobbling around today, so it's gonna be up to Chris to do all the welding, and I'm just gonna try to, I don't know, I can't sit, so I'll either stand or I'll lay down on the floor and videotape it. I don't know what I'll do. But anyway, Chris is coming over. We're going to make some changes to this thing. Change number one is we need a longer handle. And because we have to make the handle longer, it's now going to hit the ceiling. So we actually need to put a kick in the handle so that it clears the ceiling. I'm going to do this by grinding deep bevels where I need to weld so that I can get plenty of weld material in there, because there's going to be a lot of strain in that one spot. Second thing we need to do is simplify the base. The problem with the base was that it was getting full of clay and little bits and pieces, nooks and crannies. So I'm simplifying that whole thing, and we're just going to do a single base that can be easily washed. Now, the third problem is that the canister would sometimes ride up and let clay squish out. To fix this problem, I bought some brackets from Harbor Freight. I'm going to drill and tap those onto the canister itself, and then they will clamp down over the aluminum plate onto the base. That will make it so that you can just pop those clamps and then take everything that's covered in clay remnants and bring that right over and into the sink, and then bring it right back, clamp it right back down in place. Simplify everything. There it is. Perfect handle material, ready to be molded on each mug or cup or whatever. You know, I really think there's nothing better than something that's handmade. If you think about it, all the things that we really hold as valuable as far as items that were built, if something is handmade, that's like a stamp that you can put on it. This was handmade. You know, you think about things like samurai swords, right? That's always just been something I've been enamored with, is that laborious process that they used to have to do to make those swords. Or just pretty much any blacksmithing project in general is just, there's a level of value that people hold up. And machinery can print out that stuff way faster. But there's something to be said about the artistic value that gets put into everything that's handmade. At the end of the day, things that are handcrafted, made from someone, they have a level of art that just can't be reproduced. I guess that's what it is, isn't it? It's the artistic character that something gets put into something that's handmade that holds so much value. It kind of makes me want to be a potter a little bit. This has been a really challenging build. There's been a lot of curveballs. Both methods that we built work, but just one thing works a little bit better than the other. And that's just kind of the way of the world. When you build something from scratch, you're going to finish that and use it and then realize you could do better. So I just want to challenge you, pick something up and try it. Try to build something. Don't worry about if you fail or not. Just the only real failure is ever not trying it in the first place. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you in a few weeks. Peace out. It's just dumb.